Graveborn in Odyssey. Chapter 3 Blast from the Past. Wick didn't expect it to be like this. Her life flashing before her eyes. But then again, her life was a mess. A various ethereal set of memories began forcing themselves into Wick's vision. The Father Faraday facility for disenfranchised youths was the prison, literally. It had been a federal prison in a dying mining town which had run out of verifordium ore decades before Wick had gotten there. It had been scrubbed of its previous purpose, but the infrastructure was still there. She remembered Owl and school. The Tealoxan Kykril High Educational Complex was the newest thing built in the town, and it stood in strong juxtaposition to the borderline shantytown that surrounded it. A massive 4-block structure. Teachers and artificial intelligences were brought in to entice the rich to come in, to expedite corporate gentrification of the area. A gambit which worked. A new district was erected nearly overnight, further creating a wealth gap within the town. One problem family, for Candlewick at least, was the Mastersons. Particularly, their youngest son, Garrett. The Mastersons were scientists for the infamous company Phytozaton, so-called innovators to bring the company forward. Garrett, however, was bent on the degradation of Candlewick. Wick made an innocent mistake once, showing up Garrett with her inherent intellect. Always correct in spelling, precise with equations, and knowledgeable about history, a young Candlewick was quickly targeted by Garrett, insecure in his station. Quickly, he would find out what happened to her mother, and from there would relentlessly mock Wick by referring to her as Graveborn. She thought she'd remember more, in all honesty. She then clocked into what Owl had said. When Garrett Masterson bleached my eyes, Vanessa scooped me up and got me new eyes, and I didn't really have any other choices. So, Owl looked for the words to say, "That's why you hate cybernetics? Because it wasn't my choice," Wick wailed. "Not to split hairs," the typically reserved Owl started, "but you didn't leave me with much of one either, Jane." "Wick!" Wick yelled back. "Wick, whatever insane fucking name you want to call yourself." Owl groaned loudly over the rush of wind. "You fucked up my life. You owe me. And you're not gonna die while you're in debt to me." I... Wick began to scowl. However, she then lost the spark of rage that began to rise in her chest. "I don't know how many times you're gonna bring this up, but I'm not gonna stop apologizing," Wick cried out. "You're good," Owl hesitantly shouted back. They stole a glance back at Wick. Her gray skin was paler than usual. Owl cursed silently, checking their map. Minutes from Huxley. Though, Owl wondered, were minutes enough? As the two pulled up to Doc Hux's clinic, Owl managed to unclench her jaw long enough to shout, "Are you still alive?" over their shoulder. "Yeah," an ill-sounding voice returned. Owl looked at Wick, who shockingly looked more queasy than on the verge of death. Owl, now feeling compelled to take on the safety of their friend, looked around. Dingy, unkempt, unclean. Abandoned cars filled the street, many stripped of everything but the frame. Piled garbage from the recent unemployment crisis and underfunding of democracy's infrastructure upkeep department littered the street. So, nothing much about the borderline abandoned Nicholas district had changed. Some of the abandoned buildings even still had Wayland Nicholas House Holdings branding on them, faded after nearly 2 centuries. Owl hated Nick Tech. They looked at Wick again, understanding suddenly the hate for cybernetics. Pulling Wick's arm out of the side bag, Owl dragged both the arm and its owner into Huxley's clinic. The smell in the clinic was stomach-turning. A lingering scent of coppery blood hung in the air like nothing out of place. Out of place. Sounds of machinery. Sounds. Owl had become incredibly distracted. The problem was the Nictech Starwalker standing behind the receptionist's desk of Dr. Huxley's clinic. Owl remembered the distinct feeling of helplessness that had come from being one of the last six of a group of 30. They had watched tens of thousands of PMC Starwalkers, and other Nictech machines rampage through the Magnatech construct world. Starwalkers and other Nictech machines, rusted, filthy, anthropomorphic bird-like robots with crude uniforms and beat-up rifles, slaughtered every last Magnatech employee that they managed to get their awful metal hands on. By the third day of the siege, human bodies, the ones that were intact enough to be so, were strung up in a hangman executioner style from streetlights. Some of the lights bent from the weight of the mass of corpses hanging from them. On the fifth day, the heat from the summer sun caused the bodies to begin to rot. The smell was truly revolting, to the point that Owl and the rest of the survivors decided to disable their nasal implants. By the second week, when help had finally come in, it was only Owl. The rest of their group had been struck again and again. When they were found, broken, battered, and on the brink of death, they were taken away, put back together, stronger, trained to their peak, and sent back out to get revenge. Owl reached for a service pistol that wasn't there, their heart racing, throat feeling like it was closing up. What was a Starwalker doing here, in Huxley's clinic? This place was supposed to be safe, was it not? Yet, in a red suit jacket, it sat there, it mocked them. Owl grabbed Wick and turned to leave, yet in a woman's voice, one that sounded almost human, it called after the duo. Patient files 19388 and 27323. You're here unscheduled, it said, sounding surprised. My apologies, 27323. If I had known you were going to be here, I would have had the doctor. What are you doing here? Owl shouted, turning around. Please, patient file 27323. I am aware of your post-traumatic stress response due to your campaign against... You're a war machine, Owl's lip curled. You. Owl! A masculine voice boomed out. The voice wasn't particularly deep or imposing. The Rapture Company default male 3 voice. If you have an issue with my staff, you are welcome to file a patient complaint later. He stepped out in his brown suit, rubber gloves and a butcher's smock still drenched in blood, protecting the suit beneath. His head, an abstract vertical L shape, contained one blue rectangular cap on it, protecting the sensor array within. He still had the default matte chrome coloration that he'd come with, however long ago. Now, while I will not make an attempt to ease your mind about Margot, I will ask. A dot of light under the blue eye cap trailed back and forth between Owl and Wick. Oh dear, Huxley said, clasping his hands together. Well, since Wick is a priority patient, Huxley held a hand out. Please leave her with me. Though, if you're bent on shouting at my secretary, I will have to ask you to come back when you have an appointment, so I can get one of my assistants to check you in. Please, leave her with me. Though, if you're bent on shouting at my secretary... Owl looked at the mechanical surgeon. This style of machine, the Rapture Company chorus shell, had been what saved them when the board came in to extract Owl. Though they were several days too late to get everybody else. Owl let out a shaky sigh. Just make sure she's okay, Huxley, Owl sighed, holding out Wick's severed arm. Huxley shook the limp limb. What do you want me to do with the arm? He asked as the handshake turned into a simple grasp. Can you not put it back on? Owl asked. I can see what I can do. Huxley shrugged. His head turned to look at Wick. Miss Graveborn? Huxley asked. Wick was worlds away. She remembered how persecuted she was. From as far back as she could remember, which was about 9 months old, the nunnery had been calling her Candlewick, Devil's Child. She should have died before she was born. Her mother allegedly doused in acid and burnt alive, but she lived. And due to the chemicals that permeated the lower classes of the corpus strip, she had become a metahuman mutant. She had all of the organs found in the human genome, but that looked terrible, especially to the murder of nuns that had found her. As she grew older, gained autonomy, the nunnery was terrified of her, considering most of what she touched tainted. As if there was a miasmatic aura of evil, this superstition slowly spread to the rest of the town, and before long, nobody wanted anything to do with anything young Candlewick touched. Something as simple as a candy bar to something as complicated as a computer, because a child who knew no better touched them. Miss Graveborn, Wick heard from far away. Why was she... Huxley. Why was she at Huxley's? How did I... Wick started asking. How did I... Wick started asking. Her chin itched. She moved to scratch the itch, but her arm didn't move to scratch it. Then she remembered it was gone. Dying was decidedly disorienting. You got your arm ripped off by an anti-armor round, Owl stated simply. Oh, Wick said. Right. A wave of sickness flooded over Wick. How am I not dead? Great question, Huxley said, slowly grabbing her by the remaining arm as well as wrenching the missing one from Owl's hand. The machine began to drag Wick into his clinic, keeping pace with his patient. Continuing with his question, Huxley asked, Before we begin, how can I help you today? Doc, can I be honest with you? Wick asked. Always, Huxley said. I just... Candlewick hesitated, another wave of nausea hitting her. I just want you to make me better. Vanessa and her troop sat pondering what to do. They were all recording, so if they were caught, anything they filmed from there onward would be incredibly incriminating. There was also the fact that this place was incredibly sketchy. The only reason that Vanessa had known where to go was that a month earlier, she had sent Owl and Wick to track Jonathan Hairbright, since he had started to dodge Vanessa's calls. Seeing as he wasn't home, which Vanessa knew thanks to Misty, he had to have been here. Vanessa's other main point of concern was the fact that there was a collection of deranged purchases that Dr. Hairbright had made using her loaned funds. About a decade previous to this, one of the stronger Nick-Tech holdouts, the Disciples of Nicholas, had come back out of hiding. They had continued to advance the Wayland Nicholas House series of schematics in secret, becoming even more deranged mech bodies, past the point of cyborghood, just brains and jars attached to machines. Tracking the digital coin that had been lended, and the movements Hairbright was making, he'd come into possession of the wreckage of several of their minions, specifically of Loathing and Aegis. The gang had no concept of what would be waiting for them in that building. But what would have... Tracking the digital coin that had been lended, the movements Hairbright was making... Tracking the digital coin that had been lended, and the movements Hairbright was making, he had come into possession of the wreckage of several of their minions, specifically of the minions of Loathing and Aegis. The gang had no concept of what would be waiting for them in the building, but whatever was there, it was not going to be easy. So, Vanessa began to ponder. What's the play? The half-snake asked. Remember the Jodaz job? Lloyd asked to the group. Was I there for that? Paulina asked, scratching the back of her head. Polly, Lloyd scratched his chin. No, I don't think you were, but it was the one with the snorkel. Ah, Misty nodded. Wait, with Paulina snapped. What was it, a vault? Oh, yeah, you did the thing with that. Lloyd snapped his fingers. The barbell, right? Vanessa asked. Right, Lloyd nodded. Yeah, let's do that. All in agreement? Vanessa asked to quiet mutual agreement. The group then began walking up to the door. Lloyd stopped short of the welcome mat. You want to know who I wish was here for this one? Lloyd asked. The group replied in small variations of each other. Joanna and Jess, Lloyd added. This was met by another casual murmur of agreement. We'll pour one for Joe later, Vanessa nodded. Well, Lloyd said, I'm ready to get paid. He then reeled back his fist and splintered the manor's door into shards of wood. The picosecond the door was no longer an obstacle to her, Vanessa popped her Hermes 12 and time slowed down around her as chemicals and technology augmented her perception of time. Rolling up her sleeves, panels in Vanessa's arms began to unlock and unfold. This allowed tools meant to farm crops to extend, one part jutting up from her forearm, and the trisected blade extending out. With her portascythes deployed, Vanessa began slithering into Dr. Hairbright's manor. What she found was nothing short of what she expected. Vanessa made her way through what she could with the few real-time seconds she could safely use. When Vanessa returned outside, she was greeted sharply by Paulina. Gross, Vanessa, Paulina said sarcastically, gesturing at the half-snake. Oh, boo-hoo, Vanessa said equally sarcastically. They're corporate security. It's not like anything of value is lost. Vanessa shrugged, scratching her sternum before licking the blood off her arms. I'm more worried about you eating all the fun, you glutton. Paulina shook her head, drawing her lever-action rifle from her back. Though, I'm sure we'll be finding something vastly more interesting then. Paulina peered into the manor, legs suspiciously missing their counterpart torsos. Odd how all of those androids have torsos nearby, Lloyd added. But also, Paul, please stop foreshadowing. Lloyd jammed an elbow into Paulina's arm. I swear, it's like you're willing something bad happening into existence, Lloyd sighed, scooping up an abandoned rifle from the floor. Come on, Al. Joe isn't here to be foreshadowing. The cowgirl cyborg smiled at the taller man. Someone has to fill in for her. Fair enough, Lloyd shrugged, noticing that Vanessa and Misty had already gone inside. The two then wordlessly followed in.